Hello there. For about a month or so, I have had the cover for, this is the keyboard cover for the Tab Ultra C, and I've had a chance to kind of play around with it. So this video, I'm going to kind of show it to you in action. I'll kind of go over some of the aspects of it, a little bit into the pros and cons of it. And then I'm going to conclude the video. We're going to talk about my thoughts about whether someone should buy the keyboard cover or not. And that's where I'm going to definitely get into a little bit of an editorial. So it should be fun, hopefully. And I hope if you're considering buying the keyboard case for either the Tab or the Tab Ultra C, because the same case works for either device, then hopefully this video will be helpful to you. All right, let's take a look. Okay, so this here is the keyboard cover. In this case, I have it on top of the Boox Tab Ultra C, but this works for the Tab Ultra as well. That's the black and white version of it. You'll notice that there is a flap right here. You can take that flap, it's magnetic, and then you can connect it to the back, which is a nice feature. It helps hold the stylus, although of course the stylus already has a magnetic connection to the tablet. Whoops. But the flap helps hold it in more securely if you're traveling. The key to using the keyboard cover is you take this flat part and you put it down, and you'll notice that there's a crease here. So essentially you'll open up the device and then you'll connect the pins, and there's a little actually magnetic connection. Sometimes it registers fairly quickly, and sometimes it takes a little bit. There we go. So you get this window where you can both automatically rotate to landscape mode when the keyboard is connected. I have that checked on, and we saw that happen. And then they're going to show me shortcuts. I could unclick that, but just to show you what those are. And I don't know how well that can come on the camera, but you get, oops, oh no. We just saw a great example of the sensitivity. Here, all I did was slightly move the tablet and we lost the connection. So I'm going to disconnect, reconnect. Hopefully that will register. So it's very sensitive, as we just noticed. We'll click OK. Here's a list of shortcuts. It looks like there's a lot here, and it's a little overwhelming. However, the good news about that is most of these shortcuts are referring to some of your function keys here in the top row, and there are icons, and we'll show that in just a second in closer detail. But basically, like this whole side, essentially, of the shortcuts are all represented by these icons. So there's only a small handful that you'd actually have to memorize because visually you see them there. Let me pull this up toward the screen so I can get that in the light. So yeah, you can see on that top row, you've got your first few icons are around lighting. Then there's kind of a refresh button, and then there's sound, and then the last one on the upper left corner of number 9 is a screenshot button. So it's a nice nice assortment of buttons to choose from. As I mentioned, there are pins at the bottom of the device that connect to the keyboard, and that's how these connect. It's not Bluetooth. So for example, when I'm using the cover like this, all these keys are inert. They're not doing anything. So it's awkward to hold on to the device, but it doesn't create any problems by pressing the keys because it's not connected to those pins. Let's go ahead and reconnect that. Like so. Okay, that time it registered fairly quickly. We'll clear out of this. The keyboard case itself is $110. As you can see, I wrote a note about that here. It is, as you would expect, a cramped keyboard. So if I'm measuring from the edge of the A key to the edge of the L key, like so, I'm measuring about 15.5 centimeters. And just for contrast, this is a full mechanical keyboard. And if I'm doing the same thing, I'm measuring kind of at the base of the A to the base of the L, then I'm getting closer to there we go. Hold on. Getting actually closer to 17 centimeters, so I'm wrong in my note here. It's 17. So it's 1.5 centimeter difference, roughly. You do feel that. When I have my fingers on this keyboard, the spacing is such that my fingers aren't even remotely touching each other. But on this keyboard, I mean, it feels cramped, right? You can definitely tell that there's just a hair of a space between the keys. So it's definitely something that you do notice the difference of. Let me see if I can swipe. I'm going to go ahead and go into Word. I've already, here is what it is like to type. So as you can see, I can type just fine. I'm generally prone to making usually an error or two in a paragraph. And here I typed a sentence and it was perfectly fine. This went really well, but that's not always the case. Okay, there you go. You see myself making an error there. I wouldn't say that's the keyboard. I tend to make typing errors. I'm not a perfect typer by any means. So it's definitely a functional keyboard. I don't think there's any question about that. But it is a little bit tight, and that's kind of important to consider. So if I had a situation and I needed to write something, I'm here at my desk. There's no way I would pick this keyboard over this setup. Right? So the advantage of using a keyboard case like this is the mobility. And you wouldn't use it when you've got something better. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail of that at the end of the video. But just in terms of the typing experience itself, it's a good experience. And again, the shortcut bars are really helpful. If I can turn up the cold lighting with this, I can turn up the warm lighting with this, I can turn off front lighting by just clicking off those two things. I can refresh the screen quite easily, and so on. So I mean, it's a nice keyboard. The inner key is a little bit small, as you can see right there, but that's pretty typical for a mobile keyboard. The device, the cover itself is made of a faux leather, which bothers some people. I'm going to say something, I guess, a little controversial. I prefer faux leather to actual leather. Now, keeping in mind that, and I actually just came from a trip where we had a store that was full of leather goods, and we walk into that store, it was an amazing smell, and enjoyed that experience. But the products themselves are nice, but faux leathers come a long way, and it's really nice. Now, the only thing I don't know about this material, and I should point out it feels nice to the touch as well, I don't know how well it will hold up over time. I don't know how this fake leather will wear, and that's certainly something that real leather is excellent at, which is holding its integrity over time. So that is the one thing we don't know. But outside of that, I actually would prefer and do prefer this substance over actual leather. The device can be removed from the case fairly easily. Just open it up. Most of the magnets are up here on the side, so you can just grab it, and it's got a strong magnet, but you can certainly pull it out easily enough. This is one situation, and the only situation, I would argue, where actually having this protruding camera is kind of nice, because then you've got this notch right here, and you just line up the device with the notch, and it sets in perfectly well. And then if you go to the back, because of this notch, it's flush now, and you don't have those issues if you're doing any writing. Like, I can open this to write, and it's a flat experience. There's no wobble that you have if you just have the device itself. Let me show that in action. So here's the device, no cover, right? So you notice that it wobbles because of that camera bump, right? But if I have it in the case, a little bit of a wobble, but it's not too bad when you write on it. Let's take a look. Let's go into notes here. No, this is pretty good. It's better than when you have it with just the device on top of the desk itself. Would you use this as an actual laptop? Let's take a quick look at that. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on my lap. Hopefully you get the camera here. Oops, got that wrong. There we go. It's okay. The screen is not adjustable at all. So you have to work with what you get. Get rid of those. But not bad. Yeah, not terrible. This can work well in the lap as long as you can maintain that magnetic connection and you don't have any type of jarring. Let's go into Word and we'll do some more typing. Oops. So obviously it's bouncing around more. Let's user error. Type on. But it's fine. I mean, it's probably bounces a little bit more because it is lightweight, which is both a plus, but it's also a negative. It's fine. A bit bouncy, but I can deal with it. Right? That worked out just fine. It's a little uncomfortable to be looking down, but it's not. But that's a slight complaint. It's not too bad. So my overall assessment of this cover is that it's pretty nice. I think in terms of, you know, how it's a decent keyboard for being a smaller sized keyboard. You know, the satisfying click on the keys, I think that's great. I like the material here. It is a little bit thick. Unfortunately, this is really the only good cover that that Boox sells for this device. It does have another cover which you can buy bundled with the device if you buy directly from Boox. It's a trifold cover. I don't personally have experience with it, but I've heard not so great things about it, which is not surprising given Boox's past track record. So the only downer of that is that this costs, as I mentioned earlier, $110, and it adds a little bit more heft and thickness. And I'll give those weights in a little bit, but it is a thicker device. It's a little less portable as a result of that. So that is kind of a downer. But putting that aside, I would argue that for what it is, this is a pretty solid keyboard case. Obviously very portable in the sense that it's all one package, right? So now everything neatly comes together. You don't have a separate Bluetooth. Oops, let me get that magnet in there. Not getting a connection for some reason. There we go. You have a separate. You don't have a separate Bluetooth, keyboard. It's all one package, and that's nice. So for the mobility of this, it's a pretty good design. But do I recommend it? Well, let's take a break, and then we'll talk about that very question. Okay, before I get into my thoughts about the keyboard cover in general, I talked about the weight. And so the weight of the Tab Ultra C, just as a reference point, is 474 grams. The keyboard cover is 424 grams. So it, not quite, but almost doubles the weight of the device. It doesn't mean it's heavy, but it's got a little bit of heft to it once you have the keyboard cover on. So that's something to be aware of. The weight does add up, and if you're carrying it in a bag, you'll feel that weight over time. Although again, for its size, it's still relatively well designed in terms of the weight for a mobile type of device, but it does add a touch of heft. All right, so having kind of looked at the keyboard cover, would I recommend it? And this is where I might be getting into a little bit, not controversial, but I have a definite opinion. And this goes back actually, when the iPad, beyond its initial popularity, maybe 5 years ago or so, there was a real push and has been a push to basically say, hey, this isn't just a consumption device. This is also a productivity device. And you can go and you can type on it, and this can, you can do your email on it, and et cetera, et cetera. And I've always been pessimistic about that perspective. Now, there are certainly cases where an iPad is a great productivity device in that right type of format, and particularly it's kind of away from the office. There's no way that if I had the choice of working on an actual computer and I had an iPad, that I would pick the iPad. Okay, and it's because you give up things for that mobility. You give up a larger screen. You give up a more comfortable keyboard. You give up an easier ability to multitask and move between screens. Can you be productive on an iPad? Yes. But I would argue that you're doing that, you're making compromises to get to that point. And do those compromises really make sense for you? That's the key question, right? And it really comes down to how important is being mobile. And that applies to this device and keyboard cover equally as well. So obviously with an iPad, you're dealing with iOS. Here, you're dealing with Android 11. But you have your full suite of Microsoft Office apps. You can use Google apps. You can use Outlook or Gmail, and there's other possibilities as well. So can you be productive using the keyboard and this device? And yes, you can be, but you give away stuff. And what you give away is obviously you have a more cramped keyboard. You can switch between apps, absolutely. It just takes a little bit more effort. Is that worth it to you? Just a very personal anecdote. I write as a hobby, and I've been writing for a long time now. And I remember when I first started getting into writing, one of the things I thought about was, man, I can't wait to, maybe get a laptop and go into a coffee shop and write there. There was something about that, I guess a romantic appeal to doing that made it kind of interesting to me. And I ended up trying that. So I ended up buying a laptop at one point and went to, some local cafes. And, honestly, I write best when I'm away from noise, when I'm away from distractions. And it turned out that experience, really wasn't all that special as I thought that it might be. And so my point being is that if I really wanted to get serious work done, I find it's best to do it at a computer, at a home office, or at work that's really set up and designed specifically for productivity. I feel like the case with the iPad and the case with the Ultra C, these are devices that were designed for other reasons. The iPad was designed as a great media consumption device, right? You can watch videos, you can play games. With the e-ink device, you're doing reading, and you might be doing PDF marking, and you're doing note taking. And so those are the things that those devices excel at. And then in order to try to broaden their appeal, they're moving into the productivity space. And that's why you have these compromises. So to me, it would never occur to me to type on this device when I had a normal desktop computer. So, a great use case is, do you legitimately need a device away from the office that you want to be able to type on and do some productivity? If the answer to that is yes, then that trade-off might start to make sense. Then this might be a good device to consider. I just wonder how many people is that the case. I don't normally go out and see people with their computers working. I tend to see people working in their studies and their offices, either at home or at work. Well, I don't see that, but that's been my experience. And so I just don't know how many people this would really appeal to. And I think that's the critical question that you would have to ask. Is it a good keyboard for what it does? Yes. But it's $110. And the question is, would you actually be able to take advantage of it? Where would you be going where you would use a keyboard where you didn't have access to a normal computer, and in a much better ergonomic situation to operate in? And if you can answer that question, then the key and answer in a positive way, then the keyboard case is a perfectly good case. I think for what it is, it's really it's got a good quality. It seems perfectly functional, very reasonable for its size, and its size itself is reasonable given it's trying to be mobile. But outside of that, I wouldn't recommend it because there are better options for productivity, and particularly a desktop computer. Now, if you don't have a desktop computer and you're looking for an all-in-one, maybe. I still think you're giving up a lot, and you know it would be more than the mobility that you're trying to get. Maybe it's because it's important to use an e-ink screen to reduce eye strain, so that might be another reason to go for this as opposed to a desktop computer. But again, it's pretty significant compromises, and I just think that people should be aware of that before they make a purchasing decision, because the odds are you'll probably buy it and not use it unless you have a specific case in mind where the advantages of going mobile on this type of device make sense. If you do have those, sure, absolutely you can use this as a productivity device. But I think that's a pretty steep hill to climb for most people. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. I'm very biased in that regard. I know a lot of people use iPads as productivity devices, and they'll probably disagree with what I said, but that's my take. Personally, I've only seen it successfully done in people that are working on like contracting or something where they're out in the field and the mobility makes sense. Having something lightweight, something you can sit in your car and type on as you're closing out a job at someone else's home or whatever. You're out in the field. That totally makes sense. And this could be a good device for that. Just one quick comment, though. The Tab series, to my knowledge, doesn't have any type of cellular ability. It does have Wi-Fi, so you could just use your phone as a hotspot, and that would solve for that. But I did want to point that out. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful. If you have a different take on when a device like this will be useful for productivity purposes versus, say, a computer, post in the comments. I'm sure there's use cases out there I'm blind to, and I'd love to hear about them and just better educate myself if I'm wrong. But so yeah, so post those in the comments. As always, please subscribe. Really appreciate that. I'm going to keep the videos coming, so if you subscribe, you'll be able to get those notifications. And until next time, thank you very much.